Hi, my name's Andrew Cooper and I'm the Head of School Support Service for Services for Education. You may well know us through our work with designated safeguarding leader training and wider safeguarding training, the assessment work that we undertake, but also the general school improvement provision that we have and our curriculum areas professional development, which includes PSHE, which is the topic that I'm going to talk to you about today, and particularly the role that effective PSHE can play in terms of tackling these issues around sexual harassment and sexual violence that are happening within our schools. Some history as to why I've chosen to talk about this today, really. Many years ago, I started my career as a science teacher, but very quickly became head of PSHE within my school. And really that has then led to a lifelong involvement in PSHE and a lifelong interest in this curriculum area. After leaving teaching, I came to Birmingham and was a PSHE advisor with what was then the Health Education Unit. And building upon that, I then became the DfE's regional, the West Midlands regional PSHE lead, and was involved in the delivery and development of the qualification, the PSHE certification programme. My interest and involvement then led to me to becoming a trustee for the PSHE Association, the National Subject Association for the subject. So I've long had this interest and involvement, and although I wouldn't necessarily be the person coming out to support you and work with you in your schools, we have members of my team, Joe Perrin and now Lucy Welsh, who carry out that work. And if you've gone to any of their safeguarding training or their PSHE briefings, you'll have recently met Lucy and certainly may well know Joe very, very well. So really today is a bit of a personal perspective, but on an issue which I think is incredibly important and really feels as though it's come to the surface at the moment. So when I say it's come to the surface, why really is that, and why do we need to talk about it at this point in time? I think what's different is that there has been, over the last few years, a growing campaigning voice around the issue of sexual harassment, sexual violence and violence against women. And that link between those three things is becoming very, very clear. There's also been tragically some very recent high profile cases that have really shone a light on society's attitudes to violence against women. But what all of this going on around us, and also this sense, or well, not a sense, an understanding that actually during lockdown there was this significant rise in reports of domestic violence. And also I've added onto this, might seem a strange one to add onto the bottom there, but the prevalence and impact of pornography, because research has shown how pornography now is so accessible to young people, so commonplace its usage, and viewing amongst young people is very, very common, but particularly the negative impact that has on young people's perceptions about relationships, and particularly around the issue of consent. So I think there's all of these things are coming together, and they construct a narrative really that enough is enough and something needs to be done about it. And if we don't challenge casual sexism, misogyny, what we are doing is creating a culture where the rights of girls and women are not taken seriously. So we need to be proactive and act quickly and challenge behaviours, particularly in young people, before they become embedded and before they become normalised. But I think we have to acknowledge these are big issues, they're complex issues, and they're often difficult to deal with both on a professional and a personal level. So you might be thinking, well, what's the role of schools in all of this? What can they do, and why is this an issue for schools? Well, it's an issue because actually this is a massive safeguarding issue. The reality is that sexual harassment and violence happens in all schools, and even that which happens outside of school, the impact can be then felt within the school. So it's something we have to acknowledge, we have to do something about. We just can't close our eyes thinking, oh, well, that happens at the weekend, that happens in the evenings. In fact, if you have a strong and effective safeguarding culture in your school, then you will be addressing these issues. You'll be addressing them both in a reactive sense, in terms of dealing and supporting pupils when incidents are reported or situations arise, but also in a proactive sense to try and avoid it coming to that point in the first place. Sexual harassment and violence perpetrated on young people can have and does have a long-lasting, significant impact on all the individuals that are involved. But it's also a barrier to learning. Children who do not feel safe and secure in your setting because of what's going on, either in that setting or outside and bleeding into the setting, will not be receptive to learning. They will not be able to achieve and reach their potential in the way that we will wish them to. If you are being hypervigilant because you are worried or feel threatened about what might be going on in your school or to you, then your brain freezes. We talked about this idea of hypervigilance in lockdown, when we were all scanning everything, who was wearing masks, how close we were standing to each other, all this stuff that we were trying to take in all the time. This idea of hypervigilance, it freezes your brain. It means you can't process information in the same way that you normally would. So, what do we need to do about it, and how can we understand what is really going on for children? So the diagram here is Hackett's sexual behaviour continuum, and it shows the different levels of severity for inappropriate sexual behaviour. We would hope that in our settings, all our cases of children's behaviour would fall into the normal category, but this is not the case. We can use this continuum, and we should use this continuum, to assess a perpetrator's behaviour and then determine how we're going to act. For example, children whose behaviour falls into the inappropriate or problematic categories may require in-school guidance and support to rectify that behaviour. This may be something that is led by the DSL or the pastoral lead within the school. It needs to be monitored carefully, and we need to look at what's going on and then feed that into our proactive response in terms of what we're teaching about in our RSHE lessons. Behaviours which then fall into the abusive or violent categories will require further intervention from specialist services or from the police. School will need to work alongside those agencies and the local safeguarding partnership to actually ensure that the best outcomes are achieved for their pupil. Whilst behaviour in any of these categories can be significantly distressing for the victim, it is actually also important to investigate the actions of the perpetrator to find out whether actually they themselves are a victim of sexual violence, sexual harassment, which can often be the case if your young children are perpetrators on other children. So, if we take that continuum, break it down, what would it look like within a school setting? These are some, but certainly not all, of the examples of sexual harassment that children in our school may face. Sexual harassment is the unwanted sexual behaviour, and as previously mentioned, it might be a one-off or it can actually be an ongoing issue. How a child reacts to sexual harassment will vary. Some children may be able to shrug it off, while others will be actually deeply distressed about it. When discussing sexual harassment with children and young people, it's really important that we understand and reassure children and do not dismiss their concerns or dismiss the behaviours of others as just joking or banter. What could be seen as low level can actually be really harmful. If happening on multiple times a day, or lewd comments could be triggering something much deeper within a child that we're totally unaware of. And so I say we can never dismiss, we can never marginalise and demote the importance that we place on these issues and these behaviours and dealing with these behaviours. Sexual violence incorporates the more severe or extreme aspects of sexual abuse and often harm to others. Not all abusive behaviours are violent or aggressive, but those that are or include elements of sadism should be treated extremely seriously. Sexual violence can also include attempts to do things, even if they are actually not carried out. So if we bring this up to current thinking, you will be very aware of the Everyone's Invited campaign. In June 2020, the Everyone's Invited website was launched. It got a lot of media interest, very high profile. And basically it was a website that was created to give the opportunity for victims of sexual abuse to share their testimonies anonymously. But actually within that, they could name the schools or colleges. And we've had Birmingham schools that have been included with being submissions onto that website. The website received an unprecedented reaction, and now over 50,000 testimonials have been uploaded from women and from men who are sharing stories of rape, sexual harassment, and online sexual abuse. Worryingly, in these testimonials, hundreds of schools and colleges were named, and met with many stories about how the individuals did not receive the support when they disclosed what was going on to them, or perhaps even worse, the disclosures were dismissed and not acted upon, and that was for a whole number of reasons. Many of the survivors, as they're referred to on the website, have shared the ongoing impact of this behaviour and of this abuse, and what actually happens to them because of that, nobody believing them and nobody doing anything and nobody listening to what's going on for them, and that impact that has then on their lives. The website was launched to raise awareness of rape culture and to eradicate it by encouraging society to actively challenge inappropriate sexual behaviour. What it did was provide a massive wake-up call, because it really shone a spotlight on what was going on for our young people in our schools. So the government responded very quickly to this and instructed Ofsted to undertake a review into sexual abuse in schools and colleges within a month of the EI website really gaining this huge publicity and media profile. So Ofsted visited 32 schools, both primary and secondary, and spoke to around about 900 pupils. Many of these schools were schools that were actually highlighted and mentioned on the Everyone's Invited site. The results were then published in a document including a whole list of recommendations for schools, but also for government and outside agencies. The document included specific information about the types of abuse that children had experienced and what had been done about it. The inspector spoke to staff who shared their understandings, or sadly, often lack of understanding, of what sexual abuse was and how prevalent it was within their school. This is just a snapshot of some of the information that Ofsted gleaned. Ofsted asked boys and girls questions regarding the sexual abuse they had experienced and published this list of the girls' responses. Percentages on the side show the number of girls or their peers that had experienced each of the forms of abuse. As you can see, huge numbers of girls had experienced many of the non-contact forms of abuse, but face-to-face, and over social media. But worryingly, 79% of the girls questioned said that they or a peer had been sexually assaulted, with 64% of girls or their peers experiencing unwanted touching. That's over half of the girls in these schools, and thereby extrapolation, half of the girls potentially in your school. 59% of the girls or their peers had been photographed or videoed without their consent, which is a shocking number and is a sad indictment of how technology has ended up being misused. The internet and social media are a massive part of young people's lives, and they spend a huge amount of time on it, which means they are constantly at risk of being sent something or being requested to send something that's inappropriate. 51% of them said that they themselves or a peer had a photograph or a video shared with others without their knowledge. That's a huge number, and that's actually only the kids that know that it's been shared about them without their knowledge. So Ofsted noted that complacency was a big issue with staff. Many staff felt that this was just not an issue in their school. It didn't happen here. We don't have those sorts of kids. We don't have those sorts of behaviours. It just doesn't happen. But of course it does. Ofsted found that some staff dismissed it all as banter, having a laugh, part of growing up, boys being boys. And therefore those phrases actually compound the problem, because they're actually giving boys permission to use those. They're seen as okay, and therefore they can be used, therefore they become normalized, but they become part of the culture. It's really crucial for schools to have and promote a zero tolerance policy towards any kind of sexual abuse, both in school and online. And I think what's interesting is in the most recent version of Keeping Children Safe in Education, you really saw that being coming out very strongly, that we can't distinguish between online abuse and face-to-face abuse. There should be no treating those differently in any kind of way. They are of equal significance, they are of equal seriousness, and that's embedded throughout the new version of Keeping Children Safe in Education, the one that came into being at the start of September. But by embedding a zero tolerance attitude in schools, inappropriate sexual behaviours will be reported to and they will be responded to, which in turn will bring down the number of incidences. Including zero tolerance in our PSHE and RSHE lessons from the beginning of primary school will teach children that it's not okay to use sexually abusive terms with their peers, which in turn, again, gives children the confidence to challenge the language when it is used. Number of recommendations in their review, a number of findings here. Very quickly, very sad the sense that teachers and staff were just out of touch with the reality of lives of young people and really unaware of that frequency and regularity of incidences of behaviour. Children reported that their perception was the teachers thought this just all happened outside of school, and there was no acknowledgement that actually this did happen within the school day, within the school building. Some talked about rugby culture, where actually staff weren't challenging it and taking appropriate actions. And then for me, for somebody who's been involved in the world of PSHE for years, really sad. Children reported that teaching on sexual abuse in RSHE lessons was just too little too late, and that they often then turn to their peers or to social media or the internet to actually find out the information. Probably not always the most reliable source of information either. So what were Ofsted recommendations? Really, this has to be tackled through a whole school approach. We have to ensure that all staff need to be modelling respectful and appropriate behaviour in the school. Only then can all staff create an environment in which children are actually feeling confident and empowered to ask for help and support when it's needed, or to report incidents when they've been subjected to them. Staff should always assume that sexual harassment is going on and that sexual abuse online is going on, even if there is no direct evidence of it. The prevalence and the level and the commonplace nature of it means that it is going on for all schools, for all children and young people, and we must plan and adapt a policy of assuming that it does happen. This is relevant and we need to do something about it. And one of the things that we need to do proactively is really look at our PSHE teaching, our RSHE teaching, our curriculum, and actually, are we teaching and talking to the children and young people in a timely fashion to preempt and proactively tackle the issues that have been highlighted? So if you finish off talking about what we mean by effective PSHE, I'm sure you all have some curriculum aims in a policy in a document somewhere, and you'll probably talk in there about the aims of the curriculum being to prepare children for adult life, to enable them to play a fulfilled and positive role in society. Do those aims really shine through in your PSHE curriculum? Is your PSHE curriculum preparing them for adult life? Is it preparing them for the challenges that they face in childhood and adolescence? In your delivery of PSHE, are you providing an opportunity and creating a safe and non-judgmental space for children and young people to explore, question and challenge attitudes and issues that are directly affecting them? Are you having a three-pronged approach? Effective PSHE is based about teaching knowledge, teaching skills, and enabling young people to examine and explore attitudes. Without those three things, PSHE is not effective. I might know why I should do something. I might have the skills to be able to do something about it. But fundamentally, if I don't believe that I need to do anything about it, or it's not important, then I'm not going to do anything about it. That applies through all the issues and topics that we teach in PSE, whether it's healthy eating, exercise, through to consent, all of these things that we're talking about it. Three-pronged approach: knowledge, skills, and attitude. So some of the things that we need to be seeing or should be seeing if we've got really effective PSHE going on in our schools. PSHE time is allocated properly in the timetable. It is created, it's preserved, it is not marginalised, it is not squeezed out if something more important comes along. These lessons are important, and should have parity with other curriculum areas. How relevant is this curriculum? You know, are we teaching the same things that we were teaching 10 years ago? Because actually the world has changed massively for children and young people. Do we know what young people think about what we're teaching? Do we review our curriculum on a termly basis or certainly annual basis? Do we ask the young people to evaluate it and comment on it? If we're just teaching statutory orders, that's your minimum. You need to be doing something far more progressive than just teaching and meeting the statutory requirements. As I say, it can't just focus on knowledge, skill, and just on knowledge. It has to involve attitudinal work and skills work. And that has to be really broad. So including, we're talking about bias in the media, questioning, not accepting, negotiation, getting your voice heard. Massively important is that we have staff that are confident and competent to teach these difficult issues in an appropriate way and using the correct and effective pedagogical approaches. So have we resourced staff training? Have we invested time and money into making sure staff are confident, able and effective in their teaching? Do we timetable in such a way that we can actually do some more of these lessons in smaller groups? Because actually a lot of this is around small group discussion, and a great big whole class or more than one class, that's just not going to work effectively. So is there a way that we can actually add to the numbers of staff that are delivering to ensure that we have smaller groups to enable better discussions which engage more children? Make sure all our resources are up to date. Again, an age-old problem. Old resources have zero credibility and the lesson is lost. So make sure they're up to date, they're relevant. There are many, many current issues, resources, news items. There's so much stuff out there that could be used to do a really up-to-date, progressive PSHE, RSHE program. We can use high quality outside speakers as part of our program, but they shouldn't be the program. They should contribute and they should enhance, but they should not replace it. PSHE is best delivered by in-school staff and then added to by external speakers and external contributors. And then how do we use pupil voice to understand their life experiences and respond accordingly? How do we learn what's going on for them? What is their lived experience? How are we having those discussions? When are we having those conversations with them? So some starting points you might want to consider. So Ofsted calls for schools to have a clear and sequenced and detailed RSHE curriculum that's taught across all year groups. So some starting points in auditing what's going on in your school. Overall, what does our provision actually look like? Are we meeting, as a starting point, the statutory guidance? Is it sequenced? Is it a spiral curriculum that builds? So the foundations put first and then this builds in an age-appropriate and progressive manner. And their age-appropriate idea is really important. Next point, how is sexual abuse covered in RSHE curriculum? It's going to look very different in Key Stage 1 and 2 to how it looks in Key Stage 3 and 4. The lower key stages build the foundations in that age-appropriate way. And then you start to add the more specific content at the later stages in the secondary. Are we creating time for the discussion of these topics? And do the children have any actual say in what we're being covered? How are we teaching, how are we talking to children about giving them the skills to both identify and challenge inappropriate sexual behaviour? We find it difficult as adults, they will find it really tough as children and young people. And do all staff have a solid understanding of the law and what constitutes inappropriate sexual behaviour, not just those who are directly involved in teaching the subject? You've got to have a whole school consistent approach to this. All staff need to challenge, all staff need to understand what is inappropriate, what is appropriate, and how they can do something about that. If you would like further support to either review your curriculum or to review your policies or staff training around delivery of RSHE and PSHE, please feel free to get in touch with us. Drop us an email on the hello@ address that you can see there, or give us a call on the number. In addition, I say, to the PSHE curriculum support that we provide, we also cover a range of other subjects: maths, English, science, RE. And obviously we have our wider provision of support, the safeguarding training and the courses, and on the general school improvement service that we offer. If you'd like any more information about the offer and how we might be able to service whatever your needs are and provide the support that you're looking for, then please visit our website www.servicesforeducation.co.uk. You'll find all the information about what we can offer, including our list of digital resources and courses that we can now provide for you. I hope you found this session informative. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I've given you something to think about and to take away some actions from. So thank you for your time this morning. Thank you. Bye-bye.